The scene opens on a grizzled but charismatic truck driver, let's call him Jack, standing in front of a simple backdrop. He's dressed in his signature trucker attire, worn jeans, scuffed boots, and a well-loved baseball cap. Jack chuckles and addresses the audience. "Howdy folks, your friendly neighborhood open-road comedian is here, ready to take you on a wild ride down the highway of life." He pauses, gauging the crowd's reaction with a mischievous grin. "Jack, now, I know what you're all thinking. What in the Sam Hill could a hard-working truck driver possibly have to say that's worth listening to?" Well, let me tell you, my friends, the life of a long-haul trucker is filled with more drama, adventure, and straight-up weirdness than you could ever imagine. He leans in conspiratorially, lowering his voice. "Jack, and I'm here to spill all the beans. So buckle up, because it's going to be one heck of a trip." Jack steps back, pacing the stage as he launches into his first bit. "Jack, let's start with something near and dear to every trucker's heart, the never-ending quest for a decent cup of joe. You'd think in this day and age we'd have this whole coffee thing figured out, right? But nope. Instead we get this watered-down, lukewarm swill that tastes like it was brewed using the tears of 1,000 weary drivers." He shakes his head in exasperation. "Jack, and the selection? Lordy, don't even get me started. You got your classic Folgers, your generic truck stop blend, and if you're feeling particularly adventurous, maybe a sad little K-Cup dispenser with a whopping 3 flavor choices. But heaven forbid you want something remotely fancy, like a latte or a mocha." He shudders a simple shot of espresso. Jack throws his hands up in defeat. "Jack, nope, not happening, my friends. Unless you're willing to drive 50 miles out of your way to the nearest Starbucks, you're stuck with this caffeinated dishwater. And let me tell you, there's nothing quite like chugging down a steaming cup of despair while you're behind the wheel of a 40-ton semi, trying to stay alert for the next 500 miles. The audience erupts in laughter and Jack grins, clearly feeding off their energy. "Jack, but you know what they say, right? When life gives you lousy coffee, you make, well, I guess you just choke it down and hope for better luck next time." He pauses, then shakes his head ruefully. "Jack? Who am I kidding? No matter how many times we get burned, us truckers keep coming back for more. It's like some kind of twisted Stockholm syndrome. Oh, the coffee's terrible? Well, at least it's cheap and readily available." Jack chuckles, then moves on to his next bit. "Jack, and speaking of things that are readily available at truck stops, let's talk about the, shall we say, colorful characters you tend to encounter. Now I know what you're all thinking. How exciting can a bunch of tired, grumpy drivers really be? Well, let me tell you, the diversity of personalities you find at these oases of asphalt is truly a sight to behold." His eyes gleam with mischief. "Jack, take for example the guy I met the other night parked at a rest stop in the middle of nowhere. I'm talking about this scruffy-looking fella sitting around a little campfire with a group of his equally disheveled buddies, passing around a bottle of God knows what." Jack chuckles, shaking his head. "Jack, now being the friendly soul that I am, I figured I'd mosey on over and see if they needed anything. Maybe offer them a hot meal or a warm, dry place to crash for the night, you know? But as soon as I get close, this one dude just starts glaring at me, all suspicious-like. He adopts a gruff, defensive tone. 'Jack, what's it to you, trucker? You got a problem with us being here?' Jack shakes his head, grinning. 'Jack?' Of course I assure him that I'm not here to cause any trouble, just trying to be a good neighbor. But this guy, he's having none of it. Tell me they've got their own way of living and don't need any fancy diner." He shrugs, throwing his hands up. "Jack, now I don't know about you, but to me that sounds an awful lot like code for, we're a bunch of drifters who are probably wanted in at least 3 states and would rather keep to ourselves, thank you very much. But hey, who am I to judge? Live and let live, right?" The audience erupts in laughter and Jack pauses to let it die down before continuing. "Jack, and you know, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the colorful characters you meet out here on the open road. There's the guy who thinks he's a master of parallel parking, only to end up jackknifed and blocking an entire rest stop. Or the group of elderly retirees holding a square dancing lesson in the middle of a truck stop parking lot." He shakes his head, chuckling. "Jack, I'm telling you, if you want to see the true diversity of the human experience, just spend a few days behind the wheel of a semi. It's like a never-ending parade of the weird, the wacky, and the downright wonderful." Jack pauses, his expression turning more thoughtful. "Jack, but you know, for all the craziness and the frustration, there's also a sense of camaraderie out here that you just can't find anywhere else. We truckers, we're a breed apart, you know? We may gripe and complain about the lousy coffee and the endless miles, but at the end of the day, we've got each other's backs. He nods, a small smile playing on his lips. Jack, like that night at the rest stop, when I met that fellow driver who was just as fed up with the monotony as I was, we ended up swapping stories and bouncing around ideas for how to liven things up. And that's when I knew, this was my calling. To take all the weirdness and the wonder of life on the road and turn it into something that could make my fellow truckers laugh. He gestured grandly, a gleam in his eye. Jack. And that, my friends, is how the open road comedian was born. So buckle up, because there's plenty more where that came from. The audience applauds and Jack grins, basking in the attention. He raises a hand, signaling for them to settle down. Now, I know what you're all thinking, this guy's got a pretty good gig, huh? Just driving around and telling jokes all day. Well, let me tell you, it ain't all sunshine and rainbows, my friends. See, the thing is, this job can be a real grind, both physically and mentally. You spend hour after hour behind the wheel, staring at the same endless stretch of pavement day in and day out. And let me tell you, it can really start to take a toll after a while. That's why it's so important to find little ways to keep yourself entertained, to break up the monotony. For me, that's where the comedy comes in. It's a way to stay sharp, to keep my mind engaged, and to remind myself that even in the midst of all this chaos, there's still plenty of humor to be found. Jack begins his story with a mischievous grin. Jack, take for instance the time I got stuck in some of the worst traffic I'd ever seen. I'm talking bumper to bumper, not a single inch of movement for miles. Now most folks would just sit there fuming and cursing under their breath. But not me. Oh no, I saw an opportunity. His eyes light up and he gestures animatedly. Jack chuckles. I mean, think about it. You've got all these frustrated drivers, trapped in their little metal boxes, just itching to get moving again. It's a recipe for disaster, right? But instead of letting the tension build, I decided to liven things up a bit. He pauses, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. Jack. So I cranked up the radio, rolled down the windows, and started busting out my best trucker karaoke. And let me tell you, the looks on those poor souls' faces were priceless. He throws his head back, letting out a hearty laugh. Jack. At first they were just staring at me like I had two heads. But slowly but surely, I started seeing some of them crack a smile, maybe even join in a little. Before long, that rest stop was ringing with the sound of off-key country music and the laughter of a bunch of complete strangers. He shakes his head, still chuckling. Jack, now I know what you're thinking, that's all well and good, but how'd you keep the boss man happy, huh? Well, let me tell you, I may be a comedian, but I'm also a professional. So as soon as that traffic started moving again, I slipped back into my seat, cranked up the tunes, and kept on rolling. He pauses, his expression turning a bit more serious. Jack, but you know, that little impromptu concert, it really got me thinking about how easy it is to get bogged down in the daily grind, to lose sight of the simple joys in life. And that's when I realized, being an open road comedian isn't just about telling jokes and making people laugh. It's about reminding my fellow truckers that even in the midst of all this chaos, there's still plenty of wonder and adventure to be found. Jack gestures broadly, a newfound energy in his movements. Jack, because let's face it, folks, we may be just a bunch of hard-working drivers, hauling our loads from here to there, but we're also the unsung heroes of the open road, the ones keeping this country moving, day in and day out. And that, my friends, is something worth celebrating. The audience breaks into enthusiastic applause, and Jack soaks it in for a moment before continuing. Jack takes a deep breath, ready to share another chapter of his journey. Jack, now I know what you're all thinking. This guy's got it all figured out, huh? Well, let me tell you, it ain't always been sunshine and rainbows. Jack, in fact, there was a time when I was ready to hang up my trucker's cap for good. He shakes his head ruefully. Jack, see, there was this one stretch, about a year or so back, where everything just seemed to go wrong. Jack, the loads were getting heavier, the deadlines tighter, and the hours behind the wheel, endless. Jack, and on top of that, the boss was riding my tail, something fierce, always looking for any excuse to dock my pay or threaten my job. Jack pauses, his expression darkening. Jack, I'll tell you, there were days I'd pull into a rest stop, dead tired and ready to call it quits. Jack, just throw in the towel and find some other way to make a living. Jack, But then I'd look around, see all my fellow drivers going through the same struggles, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it. He lets out a heavy sigh, his shoulders sagging momentarily before he straightens back up. Jack, because the truth is, this life, it may be tough, but it's also the only one I've ever known. Jack. And the thought of walking away from that sense of community, that unspoken bond we all share, well, it just didn't sit right with me. Jack pauses, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Jack. So instead I decided to do something about it. Jack. To take all the frustration, all the exhaustion, and turn it into something positive. Jack. And that, my friends, is how the open road comedian was born. He gestured grandly, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Jack. Because let's face it, if we can't find the humor in this crazy life of ours, what's the point, right? Jack. So I made it my mission to seek out the joy, the wonder, the sheer absurdity of it all, and share it with my fellow truckers. Jack chuckles, shaking his head. Jack, and let me tell you, it's been one wild ride ever since. Jack, from the time I narrowly avoided a head-on collision with a semi full of circus animals, Jack, to the night I got roped into a high-stakes game of trucker poker at a rest stop diner, there's never a dull moment out here on the open road. He pauses, a mischievous glint in his eye. Jack, but you know what they say, the show must go on. Jack, and I for one am just getting started. Jack, so buckle up my friends, because this open road comedian is about to take you on the ride of your life. The audience erupts in thunderous applause and Jack basks in the attention, waving and grinning from ear to ear. As the applause dies down, he raises a hand to silence the crowd. Jack, all right, settle down now. Jack's tone shifts as he prepares to share a more somber story. Jack, I've got one more story to share with you all before I hit the road. He takes a deep breath, his expression turning more serious. Jack, see, the thing is, this job, it's not just about the laughs and the camaraderie. It's also about the sacrifices we make, the challenges we face day in and day out. And sometimes, well, sometimes those challenges can feel downright overwhelming. Jack pauses, his gaze scanning the faces of the audience. Jack, like the time I got the call, right there in the middle of my route, that my old man had taken a turn for the worse. The boss was breathing down my neck, the clock was ticking, and I had a full load that needed to be delivered by the end of the day. He shakes his head, a haunted look briefly crossing his features. Jack, but you know what I did? I didn't hesitate, not for a second. I turned that rig around, floored it to the hospital, and made it there just in time to say my goodbyes. Sure, I caught hell from the boss, and that load was a day late hitting its destination, but in the end, none of that mattered. Jack's voice cracks with emotion, and he pauses to clear his throat. Jack, because the truth is, out here on the open road, we're not just drivers, we're family. And when one of us is hurting, the rest of us are there to lend a hand, no questions asked. He nods solemnly, his expression softening. Jack, so yeah, this life of ours, it ain't always easy. But you know what? It's worth it. Every single mile, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, it's all worth it. Because at the end of the day, we're in this together. The audience falls silent, captivated by Jack's words. He takes a deep breath, then lets a wry smile spread across his face. Jack's tone lightens as he prepares to wrap up his performance. Jack, but enough of that heavy stuff, huh? You didn't come here to see me get all sentimental. You came here for laughs, and by golly, that's exactly what you're gonna get. He claps his hands together, his energy quickly returning. Jack, so buckle up folks, because the open road comedian's just getting started. There's plenty more where that came from, and I ain't going anywhere anytime soon. The audience erupts in cheers and applause, and Jack basks in the attention, tipping his cap and waving to the crowd. As the scene fades, the familiar rumble of a diesel engine can be heard in the distance, signaling the start of another adventure on the open road.